Have you ever found yourself in a late night shopping spiral, filling your cart with things you either don't need but convinced yourself that you do, or just really want? Maybe it was a flash sale, maybe it was one of those haul videos that made you think, wow, you know what, I do need a bedazzled avocado slicer. Well, unfortunately, you are not alone. And today we are breaking down why we buy and, more importantly, how not to. Hey everyone, Amber here, and welcome back to Sustainable Jungle, where we share sustainability tips, tricks, hacks, products, brands, and stories to better our planet. And today, I want to talk to you about something that we all fall victim to. Granted, some of us far more than others, but still all of us to some extent. And that's buying stuff we don't really need. And let's be honest, it's so easy to get sucked in. The flash sales, the influencer hauls, the limited time only deals, the pressure to consume crushing us from all sides. Before you know it, you're holding 3 packages of things that you don't even remember ordering. But why? Why do we keep spending even when we know we shouldn't? Well, it turns out our brains are kind of wired for it. Marketers and brands understand this really well, and they've mastered the art of making us crave more. So we're going to dive into some of the ways that you can break that cycle and look at why we buy in the first place. Because I think the key to stopping any kind of behavior is to first understand it. But first, please hop down just a touch and hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons on this video if you haven't already. So, why do we buy? Well, science says shopping, and especially impulsive shopping, triggers the release of dopamine, or our brain's feel-good chemical. So every time that you hit buy now, you're getting a tiny rush of pleasure. And companies, they know exactly how to exploit this. Now, there are several tactics that they use, and the first one is scarcity marketing. So on a lot of websites, especially fast fashion ones like Shein and Temu nowadays, you've probably noticed that only 3 left warning that you get when you add something to your cart, or maybe you get emails notifying you that something is almost sold out. That's what scarcity marketing is. It's making us panic buy before we think. According to one study, scarcity enhances both the perceived uniqueness and the perceived value of a product. And it also taps into the dreaded FOMO, or fear of missing out. And other studies have shown that fear of missing out is a huge motivator for unnecessary impulse purchases. But some of those same studies also show that mindfulness has a significant moderating role in the relationship between FOMO and negative consequences. But we'll get to that just a little bit later. Another factor that companies have been exploiting more and more nowadays is herd mentality, which tells us that if thousands of people are buying it, it must be good, right? In essence, seeing other people buy makes us more likely to buy. And research from Robert Cialdini's Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, which was published in 1984, shows that we tend to mimic the behavior of others, especially in uncertain situations. And ironically, even though we actually buy in the physical presence of others less and less nowadays, online shopping and the rise of influencers and hauls have actually made this problem way worse. Think about it. We are always exposed to people buying things. Need to check your messages on Instagram? Oh, there's a recommendation post right at the top of your feed of an influencer shilling for some new product. Maybe you're going to watch a new movie trailer on YouTube, and there's yet another Shein haul on your home feed to act as testimonial marketing. And if you missed it, we do have an entire video on hauls and why they're really terrible for this, so I recommend checking that out as well if you want more details on specifically why haul culture sucks so much. But sticking to the topic at hand, social media has essentially made it so that everyone is always showing off their latest purchases, which then makes us feel like we need to do the same. The more we see influencers or even our friends buying something, the more like we feel like we should too. I mean, look at the very term influencer. They influence us. That's their job, to the point that 75% of people now use social media for purchasing advice. If buying were not a huge component of that, well, influencer marketing would not be a $21 billion market. Brands would not spend this kind of money on something that didn't work. And 85% of brands do indeed say that it has a much better return on investment than other traditional marketing channels. And of course, we can't talk about social media's influence, get it, on consumption habits without talking about its absolute obsession with video content. To the point that digital video marketing is a $135 billion industry in the US alone. And have you ever wondered why all these platforms, TikTok, Lemonade, Facebook, and Instagram, which, if many of you remember, used to be about photos, have now become so video focused? to the point that Instagram's algorithm vastly prefers Reels to photos? Well, it's because studies show that videos are more likely to make people buy. And it's all about making money, right? As one piece of anecdotal evidence I found states, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a 1-minute video is worth 1.8 million. Now, there's been tons of research done on video marketing, what works, what doesn't, and why, but here are a few interesting stats that I found. So one, businesses and marketers who used video ended up growing revenue 49% faster than non-video users in 2017, which stands up to snuff with other data that reveals that 46% of users act after viewing a video ad. That's pretty crazy. And when users enjoy video ads, the influencers who are literally paid to create content to achieve enjoyment, to entertain us at the same time, their purchase intent is increased by a whopping 97%. So it's kind of no wonder that haul videos rack up millions and millions of views and then reinforce this cycle by making it seem normal or even necessary to achieve what social media convinces us is the social norm: to continuously shop. Hint, it's not. It is really not normal. Even more concerning is that influencers and haul culture and all this constant in-your-face pressure to buy is changing our very attitudes toward consumption itself, which is a much bigger issue than isolated instances of consuming. So, for instance, sponsored content on social media was once viewed negatively by many viewers due to its intrusive nature and lack of transparency. However, recent trends and improvements in how sponsored content is prevented have actually changed this perception. So now, sponsored content is designed to seamlessly be integrated into social media feeds, making it more natural and less disruptive. According to one survey in 2015, only 14% of UK respondents and 22% of US respondents reported liking sponsored content as a way to get information about relevant topics. Fast forward a decade later, and a whole lot more integration of sponsored content into the very functionality of social media platforms, and suddenly, consumers generally have a very positive view of sponsored content. 38% of people now even say it adds value to site experience on average. And let's talk about ultra-fast fashion here for just a second, because it is really notorious for exploiting all of the former things that we've talked about. And while clothing is certainly not the only culprit of overconsumption, it is definitely one of the biggest. I mean, fast fashion brands are built upon the cycle of hyper-consumption. This cycle of lightning fast, see it on TikTok, buy it instantly, get it tomorrow, wear it once, and move on. A 2022 study from the Business of Fashion found that fast fashion brands use short-lived trends and AI-generated inventory models to keep consumers in a constant cycle of buying. And they keep prices dirt cheap because you don't have to think before you buy. Because most of us aren't influencers, we have finite budgets. So a product that costs $100+, well, that's something that a lot of us are probably going to at least take a few minutes to consider if it's worth buying that. But product that costs $5, heck, that's cheaper than a venti grande, whatever fancy fluffy Starbucks latte you might order. Practically anyone can justify these small micro purchases, so we've stopped even thinking about them as a collective. And it hardly really seems to matter that when you total the sum of all these little purchases, they add up to as much, if not more, than one higher ticket quality purchase. But by the time we think about that, the money is already spent, and the next haul video or targeted ad is out showing off the latest shiny thing that our little bird-like brains just have to have. Another sneaky trick? Psychological pricing. Have you ever wondered why prices are $9.99 instead of just $10? This is what's called the left digit effect, where our brains perceive the first number in a price as more significant than the last, with a special preference to a 9 ending price. So basically, people are far more likely to buy an item at $9.99 than $10, even though the difference is just 1 cent. And this holds true even when the difference is a lot more than 1 cent, thanks to the fact that prices get encoded into our brains as magnitude representations, aka sizes, and we actually have a preference to larger numbers. Larger as in the number of digits in the number, not the value of the numbers. So one study found that people incorrectly judge precise prices, such as $325,425, to actually be lower than that of round prices of similar magnitudes, or just $325,000. So apparently, in the words of this 2005 study that followed shortly after that one, size does matter. And while we're talking about prices, let's talk about payment methods for a second. The explosion of credit cards and online shopping majorly changed the consumption game, and not for the better. Well, depending on whether you're asking the planet or CEOs, I guess. A Forbes Advisor and OnePoll study from 2023 found that 52% of respondents were more likely to make an impulse purchase when using a credit card compared to just 24% with cash. And 58% of people felt that credit cards were their primary facilitator of higher spending, more than double the percentage for cash. And when you think about it, this totally makes sense. I mean, forking over $100 in cold hard cash feels different than just swiping a credit card for the same amount. And it fundamentally is different. Even though we do end up paying for every credit card swipe when we make that swipe, or rather input that long string of numbers on our screens, we're not actually spending our own money just yet. We're buying on credit, hence credit cards. So it feels less final. And I think this gets more extreme among people who think of them as credit and not as a reflection of real assets, which is how some people get themselves into trouble with credit card debt. I was raised, thank you mom, to treat a credit card no different than cash or a debit card. As in, I only ever spend what I know I can pay off, and I have never let a credit card bill roll over into the next month. And I know that's not always realistic because sometimes we have to use them for emergency expenses or even just basic necessities in tough times. And obviously, I'm not talking about those instances here. I'm talking about the Temu purchases, the Amazon subscriptions, that kind of thing. Times where we're just using our credit card to buy things we maybe shouldn't because it feels low risk. And this is called payment coupling, which is the association between the moment of purchase decision and the actual parting of money. So essentially, credit cards are making the expense feel less immediate and painful. And sure, there are a lot of reasons people might prefer credit cards. Convenience, cleanliness, I mean, we all know that cash is filthy, rewards and benefits that we get for spending on cards, and of course the perceived security. I do want to emphasize perceived because only one of those two payment methods has ever resulted in me having my identity stolen, but I digress. But it actually goes deeper than that because even though it's easy to justify our use of cards, part of why we're so drawn to using them, once again, is completely subconscious. Quite simply, credit card transactions activate the brain's reward regions more than cash transactions. Researchers at MIT used fMRI technology to look at brain activity, particularly in the striatum or the reward center at the moment of purchase. And they found that credit cards sensitize reward networks in the brain and thus drive greater purchasing by acting to step on the gas in the study's terms. So maybe cool it on the credit cards. Obviously, if you're shopping online, credit cards are sort of what you have to use, or at least similar systems to them. And now I couldn't find any information or studies on alternative payment methods and how they affect consumption, like Apple Pay or PayPal. So I don't really know if our brains think of these as more cash-like or card-like. But regardless, if you have the option to not use a card, maybe try it out and see if that helps curb your spending a bit. So all of that is sort of why we spend and why we overconsume, but now let's switch gears and talk about something even more important. How do we stop? Because let's be real, quitting shopping cold turkey is kind of like saying you'll eat just one chip. Probably not happening. So here are some tips that we can all use from time to time to help us cut back. Even if you're really not a chronic overshopper, we've all been known to fall victim to the occasional impulse buy. I mean, I have. I don't shop that often, but even I sometimes buy the occasional thing that I look back on in hindsight and wish that I hadn't. So no matter where on the shopping addict spectrum you fall, these are things I think we could all stand to do just a little bit more often. So one is to take stock of your consumption. Track your spending for a month. Like literally write down everything that you buy, and then mark what was actually necessary. Coffee? Probably. Scratch that, definitely. A sixth pair of sneakers because they were 25% off? Maybe not. And this will help give you a clear picture of where your money and your impulse buys are going. Number 2, try a nothing new challenge for a set period of time. Now, some people take this to the extreme, and I really admire them, and they try to achieve a no-buy year, which, if I'm being totally honest with myself, I could not do. And I reckon that most of us couldn't. So instead, start small and try maybe a no-buy month, or even a week if, not spending is a real challenge for you. And then commit to spending nothing, obviously barring necessity purchases like groceries, gas, bills, etc. And during that time, if you find something that you really are tempted to buy, bookmark that website, write down the product, whatever, and then visit it once your no-buy month is over and re-examine if you still want it. I would reckon that most of the time the answer might be no. And hey, if you do find that you still really want it, that's probably a pretty good indication that it's more than just an impulse purchase and is something that will actually bring value to your life. My third tip is to create a wish list instead of buying right away. So this one is obviously going off that last point, but this is also something that you can do anytime, not just when you're in a no-buy period. So if you find something that you want, start a wish list. Remember when we used to use those things on Amazon before we all started just buying things with one click? And I mean, I don't buy with the one click function because that stresses me out. Excuse me, I need to stare into the existential void of my cart for at least 30 minutes before clicking complete on my orders. But hey, maybe that's just me. Anyway, creating a wish list is a really great thing to do because it doesn't deny us the purchase or our ability to purchase outright. It just says, hey, wait a little bit, see if you still want it. And that tiny degree of separation is really what we need most to curb our consumption habits. Because while findings show that subjects use the information from others as cues in making buying decisions that we talked about earlier, like the haul videos and influencer marketing, these studies have also found that the influence decreases a lot along the buying process and in the post-buying phase. So, in other words, if we just take some time between seeing that ad or sponsored video to think over our purchase, we'll become vastly less likely to be influenced into buying it. Step 4, reduce temptation. Unsubscribe from those marketing emails. Unfollow influencers who make you feel like you need new stuff every week. And you might be surprised on how much this cuts down on accidental shopping. And number 5 is to set spending rules. So all of this is not to say that you cannot spend money sometimes. Treat yourself, after all. Just maybe not every day. We've kind of let little treat culture get a bit out of hand to the point that our wanton spending no longer feels like the little reward that it used to. But I find it really helpful to define a set of general rules to follow when it comes to allowing for these occasional splurge purposes. So for me, I love K-pop and I collect the albums of my top 3 groups. And I know full well that none of my K-pop related purchases are necessary. It is a frivolous little collection hobby that serves no utility except to bring me joy every time I look in my little K-pop corner. And I would argue that that itself is utility. It's okay to buy things that bring you joy once in a while, even if by all other metrics it's a useless purchase. The key is making those joy-driven purchases rare enough that they do still, in fact, bring us joy beyond the initial subconscious dopamine rush we feel simply by buying. Because the way that I see it, in our constant chasing of that fleeting moment of purchase dopamine high, we've actually castrated our own ability to really enjoy things long term. So when creating your exceptions or rules, be sure to consider what sort of things will actually bring you long-term happiness. And once you figure out the sort of things that you want to allow yourself to buy, then figure out the other specifics. How many? Or maybe you want to set a limit per X amount of time, like per month. For me, a set schedule doesn't really work because the 3 groups that I collect might not release anything for months at a time, and then they might all release albums in the span of 1 month. So my rules are that I only allow myself to buy 1 version of the album to start. Yes, many groups unfortunately release multiple versions, digipacks, etc. And it can really get out of hand if you're a hardcore collector. I'm not, so I definitely like to have 1 version of each album. And then I only allow myself to buy other versions if I see other people selling extra copies for much cheaper on, say, social media, which is pretty common in this sphere. So I'm not really buying new, I'm technically buying secondhand in these instances. I will also not allow myself to start collecting for any other groups as long as these 3 are still active and producing music. So that's how I keep myself from buying too much, and I encourage you to find a system like that that works for you too. My next tip for you is to choose new to you. So another thing that you can do when you feel the itch to buy something is to scratch it in a way that's both more environmentally sustainable for the planet and more financially sustainable for you. And that's buying secondhand. I know. I talk about thrifting and secondhand shopping ad nauseum here, but there's a really good reason for that. Choosing secondhand means way less environmental impact. You're keeping clothes, electronics, furniture, whatever it is, out of landfills, reducing demand for new production, and giving something a second life. Plus, your wallet will thank you. And get this, it still gives you that same little dopamine hit because studies show that the brain's reward centers light up when we make any purchase, whether it's brand new or pre-loved. It's just the thrill of the hunt, the excitement of scoring a deal. And let's be honest, there's something a little bit extra satisfying about finding a hidden gem at a thrift store or snagging that perfect item on a resale app. And finally, find your why. Ask yourself why you want to cut back. Is it to save money, reduce waste, stop clutter from overtaking your life? When you have a clear why, it's a lot easier to stick with it. Look, we all love getting new things from time to time, and shopping isn't necessarily bad. It's how we do it that matters. So let's be mindful, buy better, and break free from the cycle of buy, regret, repeat. Make your purchases matter, both in your own life in terms of the things that bring you real joy and utility without wasting your money, and in terms of being a dollar vote for the kind of world that you want to live in. If you found this video helpful, please give us a like, share it with a friend who needs a shopping intervention, and hit subscribe for more sustainable living content. And please, drop your thoughts on the issue down in the comments below. Maybe you have some tips or systems that help you avoid impulse buys. Give them a share. And once more, this is Amber from SJ saying see you next time.